Okay, excellent. So I was very happy to see on the poster these two buildings, Nabil, because they are very telling. These are two buildings, I mean the Egg, the City Palace Cinema, and Beit Beirut, that were not destined, or at least did not suspect that they would become heritage one day. And they became heritage almost by accident, each for a reason. And I would like, of course, as somebody who's interested in modern architecture, who calls for the preservation of modern architecture and for considering it as part of our heritage, I would like to emphasize the fact that these two buildings were built in the 20th century. We're not talking about older heritage, although we're in a region in the world that has very, very ancient heritage. And they were co-opted recently by the youth during the demonstrations of 17 October, namely the City Palace and the Grand Théâtre that I will speak about in a minute. So we do have here a case where places became unwillingly social condensers. They became places where people projected on them their frustrations. They projected on them their will to take over the city, to appropriate the city. And especially in a city where, because of reconstruction, because of the war and so on, people felt alienated from its center in particular. So I think that those moments of appropriation of the City Palace Cinema and the Grand Théâtre and other public spaces in the city suddenly revealed something that was hidden, which is that those places can embody desires, they can embody hope for the future. And this brings me to one of your questions, which is why heritage, why is it important? Well, heritage is important, according to me, for hope in the future, for hope that we compile artifacts, we compile buildings, we compile intangible heritage across time. I mean, history does. And it is up to us to make choices about what is relevant, what is meaningful to, if not to everyone, which is my title, Turathna, kulluna, yani kulluna, but at least for a majority of people. So this is basically what I mean by heritage. It is something that is meaningful to a collective. Of course, you have private heritage, but this is not what we're talking about. I would like here to speak about the Grand Théâtre very briefly, then move to my presentation. Why the Grand Théâtre? Because the Grand Théâtre that was built in the 20s went through a very, very rich life, and suddenly it was silenced by the war. And here it was a study I did in 2003. It was a commission to study the qualities of the building, but also the history of its activities. And it took a huge report of 33 pages detailing each and every event, and they go from theater to music to even a wrestling match to political rallies and so on. So this building is not only important for its beautiful stone and so on, and beautiful cupola inside, but obviously for its activities. And I said in the conclusion, here are some of the activities up to the 2000s, and I said in the conclusion of that text something that I would like to share with you now. It was very old, this is 17 years ago, but I end by saying that even more important than the actual reuse of the building at full time, because they intended at the time to do a café concert, a boutique hotel, and so on, I say it has to, even if it doesn't remain as a stage all the time, which was not their current agenda, it is crucial to allow the building to act as a social condenser, a place of culture, whatever culture may mean today. So culture is something that, of course, moves across time. The understanding of what culture is moves according to place and time and so on. And therefore, buildings can be reinterpreted. And I believe truly in a heritage that is not a frozen one in style, in time, and so on. And this is why we, with colleagues, started in more than 10 years ago, in 2008, 12 years ago, a center in Beirut, which is the Arab Center for Architecture, that works on the idea of disseminating modern heritage. Obviously, we don't deal only with modern buildings because we sometimes are invited or are interested in tackling older times, but we specialize in that. So a very quick photo. These are our old premises, actually. For those who don't know, we moved our premises recently to, and I will show something at the end, to a location that is nearby. We cannot afford the expensive rent, like all the associations running through the crisis. I titled this this poster, "When Lebanon Was Modern." So the idea is that after a true period of experimentation on modernism, we went back into some sort of nostalgia of fake tradition. So I think that what does a big disservice to real tradition and real quality architecture is the fake one that seems not to understand what is at stake when it comes to crafts, when it comes to the making of things. A very quick presentation of buildings, or mundane buildings, I decided to present mostly because it is also the idea I want to put forth, which is that heritage is not only about monuments. It is about cities. It's about what I call B-series buildings, which is like movies, you know, in B-series movies that don't have really stars behind them. They are not under the spotlight, but they are very meaningful to the making of this open book that a city is. So a very quick thing, maybe many of our audience know some of these buildings, but I wanted to refresh their minds with some of these, you know, factories, schools that are masterpieces in their own right as well, and that are meaningful. Here, the Électricité du Liban with its public piazza that is in front of the piazza is as important as the building. So public space also as heritage. Buildings for cult, whether for Islam or Christianity. And of course, the big tabula rasa of Solidaire in the center. Everything that is blue in this map was demolished after the war. So it was not only about demolishing specific buildings, it's a real tabula rasa, which is the big problem. And the reappropriation with politics of the Martyr Square, that was not in the original agenda, but was also appropriated by Solidaire to say, well, if you want a large space to demonstrate, well, we have this tabula rasa for you. So it was very opportunistic and almost cynical and cruel on their part. Buildings that have in people's memory a lot of importance, like the Carlton Hotel with hundreds and thousands of weddings, exhibitions, events of all sorts, demolished for speculation. Unfortunately, I call that the amnesic phoenix. So issue of memory is extremely important when we speak about heritage. We wrongly are very proud that we will rise again like the phoenix. You know, this is the Lebanese say, the Lebanese will rise like the phoenix from the ashes. Well, but we rise without any memory, and that's a big problem. And the fake relation to traditional architecture with buildings such as this one, that do a disservice to tradition, the dressing of modern buildings with a Lebanese garb, the fabrication of heritage with a completely new building that seems to have been there forever. Another one neo-pharaonic for the General Security Headquarters. We wonder why. And hundreds of buildings of high quality and high meaning to people, demolished one after the other. I'll show very quickly. The Saint Georges threatened, Cinema Roxy in Art Deco of the 30s. Brahim Sirso didn't have arches, but it had the first long span in concrete, 10 meters. So that's already a feat for its time, 1930s. And the courtyard, unfortunately, demolished. Many hotels of the center, even private houses like this one, very progressive for that time. The Rivoli, the Gondol building on the Corniche. So you know most of these buildings. It was just to refresh your minds. Buildings threatened, masterpieces of international quality, like the Maurice Hendy and André Wojcinski Ministry of Defense. This chalet that we're trying to register as heritage, we've prepared a dossier for it to register it here in Lebanon as heritage, and we hope we will succeed. Very important structural feat for its time, prefabrication. It brings me to the City Palace Cinema that you have on your poster. And we do have at the Arab Center for Architecture, we collect archives. So we do have the drawings of this piece, which is very unique. This is how it stands today. the Jita Grotto, the work of Ghassan Klink is ideal for a situation like this one where he preserves the grotto. So architecture at the service of the landscape and nature. Many wrongdoings like the dressing of this modernist club in Mishrif that became this one. So it was dressed with this local garb. The Lebanese crafts, which is also part of our modern heritage, unfortunately dressed also and became this one with neoclassical balustrades, red tiles that are not of its nature. And we decided, therefore, to start a center that collects physically the archives and calls for the preservation of modern architecture. And speaking about the youth, we have a lot of volunteers, architects and others who feel concerned about our cause and they participate. So you ask in one of your questions, how is it that we can disseminate and document and what is the role of the digital and so on? Obviously, a database, we do have a database online. People can come and read in our center. We want to develop the cultural value of architecture. It's not only, in Lebanon and maybe other countries around us, architecture is like a professional service. We hardly see programs on TVs architects are not part of the official cultural life. And that's, of course, does a disservice to the dissemination of this idea that architecture does not concern only the architect and his or her client. It is something that concerns everyone. So it's a platform to discuss the built heritage and to participate in the protection. Now, of course, maybe in the debate, we will have opportunities to speak about how difficult it is to actually physically protect. So instead of protecting buildings, we at least protect the memory of these buildings and the lesson from these buildings. I will show some of the activities. So we have a library. Now everything is on a Dewey system. So we will soon put our list of books. It is mostly books on modern architecture and heritage in Lebanon and the Arab world. We will put the list online soon. We collect physically the archives in a relatively professional way. We have these beautiful drawings of public buildings. I think this should be also registered as heritage, although it went through some wrongdoings in terms of additions to it, but still some of the drawings, beautiful drawings sometimes. The first house in Lebanon that has a green roof, 1970s. The work of Raguet, we have some archives of a house by Raguet. Even more recent architects like Lucien Cassia, we have their archives. Raoul Vernet, we don't have the archives in the office, but this is somebody who learned from heritage but never copied it literally. So he was a modernist. We also have the archives of Georges Reyes and Jafar Toukan. This is extremely important because we were able to send these drawings to Sharqa, to Sharjah, and they have renovated one of these schools based on the original drawings that we have. So we don't only keep the drawings for documentation, they are sometimes operative. They can serve to give an idea to people in charge of restoration about the original condition of buildings and sometimes the intention of architects. We are part of a collective called the Modern Heritage Observatory with lectures. We were sponsored at the time by the European Union. We organized lectures, debates. I heard Yasmin's speech about the importance of transmitting this consciousness of heritage to professionals in studying restoration and so on, but also to all architects and a wider portion of the Lebanese society. So we invite universities to our premises. We organized an exhibition, important exhibition on modern architecture. We disseminate postcards. It's not only about having postcards on Anjar, Baalbek, and the Grotte aux Pigeons and so on. These buildings are also disseminated and they become part of what people consider important. We organize the International Archives Day at our premises, and we invite families and kids, and they learn a lot and get interested into this heritage. Furniture as well. Art in buildings, it is also heritage. Artists designing the interiors of buildings. This becomes more professional, building skins. Lectures, debate, a lot of these. We invite people who write on heritage, on 20th century heritage and publish. So we invite them to do the book launches. So we have an audience that is not only the professional one. We are not only tackling, you know, students in schools or professionals at the order. We have a third audience, which is everyone. And again, this is why in my title, I like to call it Turathna كلنا. Turathna kellna, وكلنا يعني كلنا مش, you know, it doesn't concern only, you know, either the elite or the intellectuals or the professionals and so on. It is everyone's heritage. I will try to finish in 3 minutes, if I may, Nabil. So we have educational kits for school kids. We would like to start very, very early. So we have these young students, school students coming and drawing maps of like mental maps of their neighborhoods. And we give them lectures that are ready-made to debate with them about what is the built environment, what is, how can society move on with civility about what to build in height, what not to build in height, what is public space, and so on. And we organize, and this is one of our main success stories, I have to say, which are the guided tours. So it's a very good tool to disseminate ideas. We have a set of now around 20 different guided tours. And for each of them, we take in the city, we take a group of sometimes 15, sometimes 30 people around neighborhoods or to very specific buildings with explanations done by architects, urban designers, or people who know the neighborhood well. So it is not very, very technical all the time, but it is about storytelling. And this is very important. So here we have Zalblat, we have the Tripoli, I say the Tripoli Fair, but also some of the parts of the city. We have places that maybe some people would not suspect to find in them important heritage, like Burj Hamoud, like Furn al-Shabbak, and so on, Badaro, Yarzi and Hadat here, Maram Khail, with all the polemic, for example, here about the bridge that was supposed to go across it. And here we collaborate with the young associations like Save Beirut Heritage, like Nahnu and others. Here we supported the campaign with Save Beirut Heritage by providing whatever we had as information. And they're doing a great job. And I'm glad to see that Joanna Hammour is with us today. And I will eagerly listen to what she has to say. We were also able to introduce with the Ministry of Culture modern sites as part of the National Heritage Day. Like, for example, the Tripoli Fair. We do a trip to Rayak, train station, the Corniche, Hamra. I mean, the list is very long. And we also go to places like Uzai, like the city center. And sometimes they are thematic. Here we also would like to start promoting the idea of architects showing their work. So we're not talking only about heritage as something that is, you know, frozen in time and finished. Contemporary production, contemporary cultural production, architecture has to be disseminated. And there's nothing better than going with an architect to their own buildings and designs and sites. So here we have Hala Younes in Shetin with a couple of houses she designed there. We have here Fadlo Dagher, we have Maroon Dakesh and others. We also would like to get out of the small cocoon of the architectural profession. So we teamed up with Beit al-Kuttab to do lectures between an architect and a writer. But before I speak about that, here I show also another thing that has to do with, Nabil, with your proposal, which is what is the role of the youth? And it is about the generation, about continuity between generations. So we organized a series of lectures between two generations. You have an old architect and the younger architect. And it's a debate between them about what changed across time in the profession and what is finally relevant to keep. And not only about, you know, stone, concrete, glass, but the practice. And practice is also heritage. I like to call it praxis in the old sense of the word. Here we have Burhan Tayyara and Sinan Hassan. And this is the dual, the tandem lectures between writers and architects or urban designers about cities. These were very successful. We also were glad to work with Bernard Khoury on the Biennale Pavilion of 2014. And we produced this book, Architecture from the Arab World, 1914-2014, a selection in Arabic and English. So disseminating in our own language is extremely important. There are very few writings on modern heritage and heritage for that
Dr.
matter.
George, would you kindly just 2 minutes? If I
1
may.
minute. I'm done in 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you very
We
much.
also curated for the UNESCO in Kuwait this publication and an exhibition about what we called architectural modernities, because they are not the same across the Arab world. Modernity didn't, or modernism did not mean the same thing and did not happen at the same time, nor for the same reasons. So this is the publication. You can see all of these in our center. We have them, posters, and it's a traveling exhibition. If anybody wants to have it travel, we would be glad to organize with them a panel and a trip with the posters. They're easy to print everywhere. And we collaborated with Hala Younis on her pavilion that had to do with landscape, which is also heritage, of course, and I'm sure somebody will speak about it today. This is the book she produced. And last, again, having to do with dissemination, we realized after a few years that there are certain vehicles of dissemination. For example, this bank, the BLF, they asked us to do their own notebook or agenda, yearly agenda, yearly notebook with our archives. And then they liked the idea so much that they decided to open a blog. And on this blog, you have texts that are very short, like a 1 minute read that I wrote, and they are read by 40,000 people and others by 15,000 people. We never could have reached that audience only if we stuck to our community. The best idea that I give to everybody is get out of your cocoon, get out of your own world, of your profession, of your university, of your order, and reach out for people. They are your real partners. And lately we have moved this, the joke I made recently about this is that sometimes we park cars in buildings, but I do park buildings in cars. So we moved the center recently with the models. This is the new premises. And this is the beautiful view we have near Azariya in Sassin. And here you have our email and Facebook and webpage. And thank you very much.